Welcome to the Art of Healing podcast, the podcast that is dedicated to helping you connect with your mind, body, and spirit. This is Charlize, physician and Reiki Master, and thank you so much for joining me. I would like to remind you that although I'm a physician, the information you receive in this podcast is for educational and entertainment purposes only. You can find my full disclaimer at my website, www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. If you like what you hear on this podcast, sign up for my weekly newsletter. Check your show notes for more information and for the link to sign up. Thank you. Welcome back to the Art of Healing podcast. This is Charlize, and thank you for joining me for the month of April. April is Anxiety Awareness Month, and so it's a great time for us to go through and practice a few grounding exercises. So for this podcast and for the next few podcasts, we are going to cover 9 ways to ground your energy. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, in your show notes, I'll include a link to download the ebook that goes with this, which so far has been one of my favorite and one of the favorite downloads for a lot of visitors to my websites. And I get a lot of questions about it. And when I've had the chance even to provide print copies of it. So in your show notes, you'll find a link to download the ebook so that you can have sort of a written follow along and then to practice on your own. And once you download, it gives us a chance to stay in touch because you'll get a chance to join my weekly newsletter where I get all the information out as far as the weekly podcast and new articles and events that are coming up. Anxiety is something that we will all feel. It's part of the human experience. It's part of how our brains are wired. So we should have times that we feel anxious. And sometimes it's a good anxiety, like when you know something exciting is coming up. You're anticipating something great or beautiful. So you'll notice those changes in your body, like a fast heart rate and your stomach's a little queasy, and we call it butterflies in because it's nice. It's something we look forward to. But anxiety can become pervasive. It can become constant, and low levels of anxiety could start to consume your thoughts, and those worry thoughts could become a driving factor. So much so that they start to affect not just your mood moment to moment, but affect your mood over days, weeks, and months. And when that starts to happen, it's becoming somewhat clinical, something like generalized anxiety disorder, where it may even start to create symptoms like insomnia, digestive symptoms, fatigue, or being irritable and anxious, trouble with elimination, including diarrhea or constipation, as well as just a general sense of unease. And for a lot of people, it can be that chronic, unrecognized anxiety could set the stage for depression. So when we're talking about grounding, what we're trying to do is to give our thoughts a little bit of guidance so that they're not always going towards worry or negative. As humans, we do have a negativity bias. It's built into our brains, and it does help us to survive if we tend to focus on what could go wrong, because in a way that keeps us safe. But that could also be overwhelming when it becomes all we think about. It could fuel thoughts of anxiety. So when we're grounding, we are simply trying to get our consciousness, our energy, we're trying to get all of that out of our head and into our bodies, and particularly into the lower part of our bodies, which can often slow down those thoughts and can give us a break from the anxiety, even for a few minutes. We will practice 3 of these simple exercises during the podcast. So, what you can do is listen and actually practice if you're in a place where you can do it. And they'll be short. You could also download the podcast and maybe come back and listen later. And then, of course, you'll have the ebook, 9 Ways to Ground Your Energy, that you can also use to reference if you just want to listen and maybe practice on your own later. So for this episode, we'll start with the first of the exercises, which is a barefoot meditation. The barefoot meditation is just as it sounds. It's a simple exercise in which you'll actually perform a standing meditation with your shoes off, if possible. And if you can be someplace where you could even be outdoors, if you're lucky enough to be like on a beach or near a body of water, and you'll just simply remove your shoes, but you'll stand while you'll do this. So this meditation I've also shared in my book, 21-Day Meditation Journey, and it's just a simple exercise just to get that energy nice and grounded. So we'll go ahead and get started. So if you're ready, if you want to find a place you'll feel comfortable standing, and if you can remove your shoes, if you're doing this at a time when that's not really possible, just stay in your shoes, but just keep your attention to the bottom of your feet and keep your attention focused as much as you can. Take a deep breath in and exhale through the mouth. And with each deep breath in, just focus your attention on the bottom of your feet. As you inhale, notice the front of your foot, and you may feel the air traveling up your body to the top of your head. Then as you exhale, imagine as the air exits your nose and your mouth, that it also exits your heels. So as you inhale, feet firmly planted, and air is traveling up the front of your body, starting from the front of your foot. And as you exhale, the air leaves your body as well as from your heel. And each time you inhale, imagine that your feet become even more firmly planted. But then you can also imagine that the muscles of your legs are strong but not overly tight. So as you inhale, if you need to bring gentle movements into the legs or the hips, or even to sway your body, and then as you exhale, you might imagine that your spine becomes a little straighter, a little bit taller. So when we're doing this barefoot meditation, I designed it to be this brief and this short so that it's something you could practice if you're noticing you feel anxious or edgy in an elevator or waiting in line, or if you're waiting at a doctor's office. And maybe the situation is just one of those situations where it just doesn't feel very good. You could actually imagine just standing and sort of doing this meditation. But of course, if you've got the option to do this in a setting that's a little bit nicer, and you've got a few minutes to just remove your shoes and plant your feet. And when we get our feet in contact with the earth, it allows us to bring our energy out of our heads and to ground ourselves. Okay, so now that we've practiced the barefoot meditation, why don't we try the next of our grounding exercises? In the book, 9 Ways to Ground Your Energy, this is the rooting meditation. So we'll do a form of that right now together. And again, you can listen now, maybe try this later on your own. But if you download the ebook, which is free, it'll walk you through how to do this if this is something you want to be doing on your own on a daily basis. So just like we did with the previous exercise, we'll want to do this standing and with shoes on or off for the rooting exercise, whichever is accessible and you're most comfortable with. So this time we want to intend to do this for about 3 minutes. And when you're standing, you might want to look down at your feet and just be aware of the spacing of your feet. So preferably your feet are about the same distance as your hip bones. So if you've got sort of a habit of leaning on one foot or maybe standing with your feet a little wider, a little bit more narrow, or just sort of favoring one side, now take a moment to look down and just get a sense to make sure that you're using both feet and both legs as evenly as you can. But you can adjust throughout this meditation. Once you've done that, then pay attention to your legs. You can look down at them and maybe practice just gently bending your knees and straightening. And then finding a place a little in between so that your knees aren't completely straight and locked. Your legs are strong, but your knees have just a little movement in them. And then from there, you'll just imagine a string pulling you at the top of the head that pulls you as tall and upright as you can go. So from here, just taking a big giant inhale. And then exhale. And this time taking an inhale. And now you'll start to imagine that there are roots coming out of the bottom of your feet. And each time you inhale, you'll feel that these roots really grip to the ground. They're really holding your feet to the ground. So in the next big inhale, get a sense of the roots at the bottom of your feet. And as you exhale, those roots actually start to grow. And they grow deeper in through the floor, into the earth. And so on your next inhalation, you might notice now that those roots feel even stronger. So that even if you sway, it feels like there's something holding you in place. And as you exhale, those roots get even deeper. And then on the next deep inhalation, now you notice that even now you're more rooted than before. Naturally, your body will sway and move. That's okay, because your feet are firmly and strongly rooted. And then with each exhalation, those roots go even deeper. It seems the roots are trying to get to the center of the earth, aren't they? So for the next minute, I'll let you practice on your own, just inhaling, feeling the stability of the roots of your feet, and then exhaling as those roots grow deeper and stronger. Wherever you are, if you'd like to bring your attention and maybe your gaze back down to your feet, and now just get a feeling of how your body feels. How do your feet and legs feel? How's your back feeling? How's your body feeling? And how does the energy feel in your head? Does it feel a little bit slower? Does it feel a little bit calmer? So that's the rooting meditation. And it's one of my absolute favorites. I find myself rooting myself anytime I feel that my energy, positive or negative, is just getting to be too much. I like to just take a moment just to root down, grow some roots into Mother Earth, and then get myself back together. And for the last of our grounding exercises we'll do together, we'll do just a short form of mindful walking. There are some previous episodes in which we've done a walking meditation together. And so for this one, if you like to listen to your podcast while you're walking, this is a great time. You can be practicing while you're getting in your steps. Walking meditations are simple. It's a nice way to get yourself grounded while you're getting some movement. If you tend to lean more towards agitation when you're trying to sit and meditate, meditating while walking is a nice way to get yourself centered, but while still moving your body. And it's a good way to practice if you're trying to prepare yourself for more of a seated or laying down meditation. So if wherever you are, if you're outdoors or if you're indoors, first just notice what's around you. Just notice the sights, the sounds, the colors, the people, the animals, and you just take note of them, and not anything in particular, just noticing those. And before you start to take your steps, just notice your feet and just notice how they're feeling. And now slowly take your first step and make notice of how your heel makes contact with the ground, how your foot rolls, how the opposite foot corresponds and lifts. Then that heel hits the ground, the foot rolls across the ground onto the toes. And then gradually just pick up your walking speed to a comfortable pace, as comfortable as you like. If you're a brisk walker, that's great. If you want it to be a little slower, that's great. But for the next few minutes, as you take those steps, go ahead and let your senses play with what's around you. So as you let your legs move freely, again, make notice of what you're hearing. My voice, what you're seeing around you. Do you hear natural sounds or do you hear human-made sounds? Do you see buildings, or are you in a park, or are you hiking? But just make notice. And as you're doing this, don't necessarily make a judgment, just make a note in your head. And you'll actually walk and make those mindful acknowledgments for the next minute or so. Now, during your mindful walk, You might also notice things like the air on your skin. You may become aware of your breath as you walk. Depending on the speed you're walking, your breath may have correspondingly become deeper. But for another minute or so, just continue to walk and notice. Notice yourself, notice the environment. So, depending on where you are in this experience, you might want to continue walking for several more minutes. But we'll go ahead and conclude our mindfulness walking for this grounding experience. So, during this episode, we just did 3 simple grounding techniques with each other. Very simple, can be done at any time, don't necessarily require you to create anything special in your environment, but kind of my favorite things. These are some of my personal practices that I use when I feel that I need to ground my own energy. So don't forget, if you don't have a copy, you can get a copy of 9 Ways to Ground Your Energy in your show notes. And once you've got that, absolutely, I would love for you to continue some of these. And if you have a copy, feel free to share with your friends or family. You can actually just email it to them. And next week, we'll do 3 more of these grounding techniques together. And we'll actually do that in another week. And then we'll conclude this month with a meditation of some kind. So, as always, I'm Charlize. Thank you for joining me for today's podcast. We'll connect next week. In your show notes, you'll find links to my social media, to my website. Feel free to send me questions. It's always exciting to connect with you in this way. I do like to point out a few updates. Although this has been a grounding exercise and meditation together, I do want to point out to you that I am a physician and I have some functional medicine services, and I'm so excited that I can actually operate outside of my home state. So you'll find some links in your show notes about what those programs are and how to connect with me if you're interested. Thanks so much, and connect next week. Thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of the Art of Healing podcast. Once again, this is Charlize. You can find out more about me at www.healingartshealthandwellness.com. Did you know I have a blog as well as online courses? Check your show notes to sign up for more information about healing arts, health, and wellness. Thank you. Please feel free to share this episode with your friends, family, and loved ones.